All right. You're welcome to yet another discussion concerning neuroanatomy. So today's discussion, we're going to look at the little brain. So the little brain, or commonly known as the cerebellum. So this is a cerebrum, then that is the cerebellum. This is a brain stem, midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata. Inferiorly here, supposed to be the spinal cord. So constitutionally, this is what we call the brain. Cerebrum, cerebellum, brain stem, and the diencephalon. That is the diencephalon there. Connecting, of course, the brain stem with the cerebrum. So immediately we'll see that the cerebellum is separated from the cerebrum by the tentorium cerebri. That's the tentorium cerebri. Of course, then each, or rather the cerebellum, is divided into two hemispheres, a left and right hemisphere by the falx cerebelli. You can see some strands there. That would be the falx cerebelli, splitting it into two hemispheres. The falx cerebri divides the two hemispheres of the cerebrum. What we are seeing there is the fourth ventricle. Anterior to the fourth ventricle is the pons and medulla oblongata. Posterior to the fourth ventricle is the cerebellum itself. Of course, that is the aqueduct of Sylvius, and this is the third ventricle. All right, then there is the foramen of Monro connecting to the lateral ventricles inside there. Of course, that is a hypothalamus. Okay, so let's go on and look at parts, or rather, look at more details about the cerebellum. So we're saying the cerebellum is the largest part of the hind brain. This is the midbrain, or what we can call the mesencephalon. Pons, medulla oblongata plus the cerebellum forms the hind brain. Then this part of the brain, this is the cerebrum, plus the diencephalon forms the forebrain. This is a diencephalon here. Then if you add the cerebrum and its associated structures, that is a forebrain. So brain is divided into three parts. We have the forebrain, this one here, plus that part, midbrain, that part, then hind brain, that part, which is pons, medulla oblongata, and of course the cerebellum. Now, the cerebellum is the largest part of the hind brain of these three structures. 1, 2, 3. It is a cerebellum, and it is, separated from the rest of the cerebrum or the other parts of the brain. Of course, it has connections by axons, okay, which we call peduncles. So connections of the cerebellum to the rest of the brain, we call them peduncles. So we have inferior peduncles, middle peduncles, and inferior peduncles. Inferior peduncles connect cerebellum to the parts of the medulla oblongata and pons. Then the middle peduncles will connect the cerebellum to the pons and the midbrain. Then superior peduncles have connections with the cerebrum. Okay. So this is explained already. So we're saying on the surface of the cerebellum, we are going to find numerous fissures. Remember, we have similar case on the cerebrum, the big brain, the cerebrum here. Now, those depressions, we call them sulci. It is the longer ones, like that one, which we call fissures. Okay, so all these we are seeing as sulci. Equally, the cerebellum has them, but the orientation is different. On the cerebellum, the orientation of these fissures is transverse. Okay, so they're not following the vertical orientation. Instead, they're following the horizontal orientation. So they are running from left to right across the cerebellum. As a result, they form convolutions on the surface of the cerebellum, which are called folia. So those elevations we are seeing, we call them folia. Remember that similar structures on the surface of the cerebrum, we call them gyrus. Right? So gyrus and folia are equivalent, or they are synonymous, because they are elevations on the surface of these two structures. Gyrus for cerebrum, folia for cerebellum, respectively. Okay, so those are folia, a distinctive feature of the cerebellum. Okay, now we're saying the cerebellum has two hemispheres, the left and right hemisphere. So if you cut here, or you cut there, by the way, this is cerebellum when we are viewing it from the superior view. So those are peduncles, like you can see, attaching the cerebellum to other parts of the brain. So it has been harvested, it has been separated or cut off from the rest of the brain. So these are folia, those elevations we are seeing. Then this is the right hemisphere, this is the left hemisphere. So we are looking at the cerebellum from above. Then this one, we are looking at the cerebellum from the inferior surface. So that would be the right hemisphere. This would be the left hemisphere. Now, dividing the two hemispheres is what we call the vermis. So that is a vermis. So the vermis that is on the superior surface, we call it the superior median vermis. The vermis on the inferior surface, we call it the inferior median vermis. Median because it is in the midline of the body. On either end, we are going to find the hemispheres of the cerebellum. So that is a vermis, of course, continuing on the undersurface there as the inferior vermis. Okay. Then we are saying now this cerebellum, apart from having hemispheres and so on, and also having folia on the surface as elevations, it is divided into some form of lobes or smaller divisions. All right. So what we have now is uvula, tonsils, then we also have the posterior and anterior lobe. So let me quickly go to this diagram here. So let's begin with lobes first. Lobes of the cerebellum. So cerebellum has the following lobes. First is anterior lobe. So this is the front of the body. So that is the pons. This is medulla oblongata. That is midbrain. Then that is fourth ventricle. So this lobe is anterior because this is the anterior part of the body. And then going, this is at the back. So what we are looking at is that part there. That one is this one. So dividing the anterior lobe from the posterior lobe is the primary fissure, or otherwise known as the fissure primer. So you see that? Splitting it, that one. So they say it's V-shaped. So that is a fissure. It goes deeper all the way, dividing anterior lobe from posterior lobe. Now, you and I can observe that posterior lobe, of course, is beginning from this one and ending here. Now, the posterior lobe is this lobe, this one and that one, is cut into or divided again. Okay? by the horizontal fissure. So that is the horizontal fissure. It's going to give us now the posterior superior lobe and the posterior inferior lobe. So two lobes are found in the posterior lobe. I hope that doesn't confuse you. Of course, I think it's straightforward. So this is posterior superior lobe, posterior inferior lobe. Then there's a small part of the cerebellum. Okay, so we can observe that there's another fissure there called the posterior lateral fissure. There, dividing now the posterior lobe, which is this one, all the way here, from the flocculonodular lobe. Come in. All right, so I beg your pardon for that one. I was attending to one of my students here. So we are looking at lobes. So we have identified the anterior lobe as that one, posterior lobe, superior one, and this is inferior. Then what we are seeing at the bottom there is at the bottom, we're going to see the flocculonodular lobe. That's a small thing there. Of course, we'll see what it's composed of. Okay, so in short, in summary, we are going to have 3 lobes. 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to have 3 fissures separating those lobes. So that is 1, 2, 3. So that's your summary. 3, 3, 3. 3 lobes, 3, fissures. Okay. Same diagram here. Now let's look at parts or divisions of the cerebellum. Parts or divisions of the cerebellum, right? So when you incise the cerebellum, we are going to find, some more details inside there. So of course, I'll start from here. This is our 4th ventricle. Of course, this is the last ventricle where cerebrospinal fluid leaves the ventricular system. Then this is the whole cerebellum or little brain. Okay, my internet is becoming slow, so I hope it is recording well and the sound is clear. All right, so you can see various parts here. Of course, these parts are composed of cortex and medulla. Cortex and medulla. So before I even talk about the parts, let me just quickly summarize the cortex and medulla. So the surface of the cerebellum, of course, like the cerebrum itself, is made up of gray matter. All right. Now, when you say gray matter, this is nothing but collection of cell bodies. So those are cell bodies you're seeing in brownish this time. They are not gray here, but rather brown. Okay, because this image tries to simulate how the brain looks like when you get a brain from a cadaver to look brownish. Okay, now. So that's more or thick or thin, sorry, that thin layer we are seeing there, brownish in color, is the cortex and is composed of cell bodies. Then the core, look at that. That is white matter now. So now if you pay attention, you see that the white matter appears like a tree pattern if you follow it up like that. So this more like a branch, the stem, and then sends off various branches into the cerebellum. Okay. So gray matter, white matter. Now, gray matter cell bodies. White matter, we're looking at axons and dendrites and so on and so forth. So white matter is really just transportation, okay? We know that axons transport impulses away from the cell bodies. Then the cell bodies, of course, this is where there is now command. The actual functions of the cerebellum depends on what these cells in the cortex of the cerebellum are commanding. So let's quickly look at the parts. So number one, we have what we call the lingula. That is anterior lobe, by the way. This is anterior lobe up to here. So within the anterior lobe, we have the following parts. We have the lingula. Then we have the central lobe, or central lobule. Then finally, we have the caumen. Lingula, central lobule, and caumen. Okay. Then we have, so this is a caumen, sorry. Caumen, up to there. Caumen, central lobe, and lingula. Those parts. Anterior lobe. Let's look about posterior lobe. So posterior lobe has the following. The delclive, that's the first part, of course, found in the superior lobe of the posterior lobe. Next is the folium. See that? Folium. Next is a tuber. That is a tuber. So we are done with the superior lobe. Then the inferior lobe has the following. The pyramid, that large part there. Inferior lobe of the posterior lobe, by the way, that's a pyramid. Next is the uvula. Then we have the nodular and the tonsil. So that is the nodule, and this is the tonsil. All right, so the two of them, the tonsil and the nodule, is what we call the flocculonodular lobe. I beg your pardon for that one. So flocculonodular lobe is a tonsil plus the nodule, this part. So now observe that the tonsil is the part of the cerebellum that lies closest to the medulla oblongata. That is the medulla oblongata. This is the pons. This is medulla oblongata, right? Then this is a skull bone. This is the occipital bone. That is a sphenoid bone. Okay, now that gap here, this space there, is the foramen magnum. So if you cut here up to there, above this opening is a medulla oblongata. Below this opening is a spinal cord. So this is spinal cord ending here. From here going up is medulla oblongata. Foramen magnum. Then that is the dura mater. That is the dura mater. Then these are sinuses, okay? You can see those spaces. Those are sinuses, all right? So those are divisions of the cerebellum. Of course, we have 3 lobes, but these lobes have their own divisions like that. Okay. Away from this, now we look at the functionalities. So the lobes and their divisions are grouped together and then assigned new names. So the cerebellum is divided functionally, or you can say physiologically, depend on their evolutionary stages, right? Okay. So the oldest part of the cerebellum, we call it the archaeocerebellum. Then the much more developed part of the cerebellum, we call it the paleocerebellum. Then finally, the newest, okay, or the part of the cerebellum that developed later on when the humans have evolved is what we call the neocerebellum. So neo means new, all right? So archaeocerebellum is the flocculonodular lobe and the lingula. So if you add tonsil, nodule, and lingula, this part here, if you cut like that, and then remove the tonsil as well, is what we call the archaeocerebellum. Now, what is it associated with? So it is the oldest part of the cerebellum. So this part of the cerebellum deals with equilibrium, maintaining balance, all right? So it is found in oldest organisms to exist before human beings, for example, fish. So you find that fish, they also have ability to balance, right? But beyond that, they really don't have so much to do. They will not plan activities for tomorrow. No, tomorrow I'll be swimming on this side of the river or this side of the sea. Fish has nothing to do with that. They'll just know how to balance. Next is excretion. First balance. Next is ingestion. They have to eat. Later on is excretion. And then also have the ability to survive. That is to detect what is dangerous and run away from what is dangerous. That's all. And also maybe reproduction now, because they have to reproduce their offsprings. So this type of cerebellum, or this part of the cerebellum, is found in even lower organisms. Then we have a much more developed part of the cerebellum. So we call it the paleocerebellum. So this is involved, or it is composed of the anterior lobe, the uvula, and the pyramids. So the remainder of the anterior lobe, the uvula plus the pyramid, forms the paleocerebellum. Okay. So this part of the anterior lobe, add the uvula plus the pyramid, then you get paleocerebellum. Okay. So the central lobule, the culmen, uvula, and pyramid now is composed or form the paleocerebellum. Meaning what remains now? The declive, the folium, the tuber forms the neocerebellum, the new part of the cerebellum. Okay. Or simply the posterior lobe forms the neocerebellum. So paleocerebellum, what is it involved? So paleocerebellum is seen in organisms which we refer to as vertebrates. All right. These are organisms with a spinal cord, with a vertebral column, okay, like the spine there at the back. And then those that have limbs. So mainly balancing here and negotiation with gravity, running and so on and so forth is seen. So talk of cats, giraffes and so on, all those organisms with vertebral column. So what is the function there? It helps in locomotion. So to coordinate balance plus locomotion and ability to stand, erect. That's when the paleocerebellum comes into play. The neocerebellum now, the posterior lobe, majority of the posterior lobe, you find that it is involved with control of skilled, learned, and fine motor functions. Or okay, for example, tying a shoe. That is learned skill. Okay, it seems automatic. When you're given a shoe, you can easily tie it. Okay, writing. All those are learned skills. Drawing, like artists. All right. Then other fine skill, for example, knitting. Those are fine skills that require proper adjustment of muscles and coordination of these muscles with the nervous system. So this is the latest part of the cerebellum. The declive, the folium, and the tuber. So this later evolved and it's found in human beings. Now, you see that the part of the hindbrain that is biggest is the cerebellum, all right? Now, these lower other organisms like cats, monkeys, and so on and so forth, the parts of the cerebellum that are more developed are different from those of human beings. Of course, they may have all these parts available, but you find that they depend so much on balance. A cat can fall and still land on its legs. Same with monkeys, jumping from one tree to the other. But they really don't have this finer control, like, touching a pen, using that pen to write, knitting, sewing, and so on and so forth, because their neocortex is not as developed as human beings. For that, human beings have also compensated. So you find that when it comes to balance, we can't really match up with those organisms I've mentioned because our parts that deal with balance are poorly developed. Okay, so you give something and take something. That's what happens in evolution. All right, so that is division of the cerebellum based on function. And we're saying this function correlates with evolution. Which one came first, and it can be found in other organisms. And we are saying now human beings are the end or the apex of evolution. Okay, we can't compare human beings with other animals, right? Even religious wise, we see that, human being was made in the image of the creator. Now, this was explained, all right? The surface of the cerebellum is cortex, the middle part is white matter. So that is white matter, that is cortex. And those we are seeing, folds, we call them folia, right? Now, one thing I should focus here is their pattern of white matter. So it looks like a tree. So in Asia, there's a tree called arbor vitae, all right? That is arbor vitae. So this is a tree, a shrub, if you like. Okay, that's arbor vitae. So the name for this arrangement of white matter, look at that. That is white matter, more like this tree. There isn't so much different. You follow that. It has those branches, which we are seeing there. So arbor vitae is a pattern of white matter, or the medulla of the cerebellum. It's called arbor vitae. So what is the function of this? Okay. So number one is position, motion, and balance. Of course, communicating with the cortex, which is gray matter of the cerebellum. All right, so functions of the cerebellum, I think we have already tackled some of them. Number one is maintenance of posture and balance. Ability to stand as human beings is something that we rarely think about, but really the parts of the brain are at play. If there's damage to the cerebellum, that's when we'll see now this person failing to maintain posture. Next is maintenance of muscle tone, especially when movement is involved. So there's a certain muscle tone that you need to achieve or complete a motion. Then coordination of voluntary motor activity. All right, for example, when you're running, the body must balance because at any given time, it's only 1 foot that will be touching the ground. So to prevent falling and so on and so forth, the brain is balancing with the cortex. Remember the motor cortex, the precentral gyrus, or Brodmann area 4 and 6. Those are involved in motor control, especially when that deals with voluntary muscles. Now, what happens when there is damage or dysfunction in the cerebellum? Okay, so there are so many disorders that we see when the cerebellum is affected, right? One of them will arise from the following: vascular occlusion. So blood supply to the cerebellum is essential because those cells there are nerve cells and they need constant supply of nutrients, gases, and other things. So blood vessels take that, arteries take blood to the cerebellum. And we discussed this under circulatory system. We looked at the cycle of Willis and which blood vessels go to the cerebellum. We have the anterior inferior cerebellar artery, then the superior cerebellar artery, such kind of things. Next is neoplastic disorders. So tumors, either malignant or benign. Those may cause damage to the cells of the cerebellum or indeed compression to the cells of the cerebellum and interfere with its function. So the signs would depend on which part of the cerebellum is affected. Is it a neocerebellum? Is it a paleocerebellum? Is it a achiocerebellum? We have conditions that we call demyelinating conditions. For example, multiple sclerosis, where myelin sheath is removed. Okay. Sometimes it's due to toxic substances. Maybe someone ingested a drug or was administered with a poison that affects the ependyma cells of the central nervous system that achieve myelination. So that causes short circuits in the brain and interfere with coordination and tone of muscle during balance and motion. All right, now we're saying damage to the cerebellum usually is unilateral. It's either the left or the right hemisphere that is affected, rarely bilateral. And in that sense, we are going to see that the effect is seen only in one part of the body, which is being controlled by that hemisphere of the cerebellum. So symptoms include the following: ataxia. So this is incoordinated movement, all right? So this person usually staggers, they don't walk properly. So we call that as ataxia. Commonly seen in patients who have head injuries. Then we have tremors and dysmetria. So this is overshoot or undershoot. Okay, for example, if you want to reach, to touch your phone on the table, okay, you find that you need to stretch your arm in relation to the distance that the phone is away from you. Now, when patients have dysmetria, you find that they may overshoot and the arm will bypass the phone, and then they have to readjust the arm and pick the phone. So if you observe that in a patient, then there's something wrong with the cerebellum. Then you have condition known as distal diadochokinesia. Diadochokinesia. I beg your pardon for that one. Just check the spelling for me. I have problems pronouncing such kind of tongue-twisting words. So this is simply inability to perform rapidly alternating movements. All right. So, for example, moving, turning, twisting and turning, such kind of things will be impaired. For example, supination, pronation, turning your hand like that. So the patient will be slow. Show me your palm, show me the surface or the back of your palm. You find that they are very slow in performing such commands. Again, we question the cerebellum. So it can be in one arm, then you know which part of the cerebellum is affected in this case. All right. Okay. Next is dysarthria. So this is difficult or simply unclear articulation. So speech is affected. Okay, to be slow, to be too loud, too soft, or the person is taking much longer time to complete a simple sentence. Again, we question the integrity of the cerebellum. Then we have nystagmus. We have individuals where eyes fail to focus. Okay, right now I'm looking at the screen, and these eyes are focused, but these individuals find eyes are dancing left and right. They are constantly in that motion. So that condition is known as nystagmus. That is simply ataxia of ocular muscles, incoordination of ocular muscles. So other muscles are pulling on the left, the other one on the right. So at any given time, eyes are kept in motion in that sense. Again, it is a cerebellum, right? Okay. So when it comes to cerebellar control, usually the nerves do not decussate. They don't cross each other. So the right part of the cerebellum will control motion and balance in limbs on the right side of the body, different from the cerebral hemisphere, because they're just coming in to maintain balance and then maintain posture and coordinate, muscles. Other disorders include hypotonia and staggering gait. Okay, you see someone shuffling and failing to lift up their legs. Then constitutionally now, and depending on the description of the lesion, so signs of problems with the cerebellum can be grouped into two syndromes. So we have aciocerebellar syndrome and neocerebellar syndrome. So aciocerebellar syndrome deals with incoordination of muscles that deals with equilibrium. Muscles that help us to balance, all right? We're looking at these giant muscles in the lower limbs. Muscles attached to the spine. Okay, we have a lot of spinae muscles at the back there. Okay, one of them is erector spinae muscle. So those muscles help us to remain in an upright position. What else are you going to see in this person? First of all, the gait is very wide. They spread out their legs. Then they fail to balance properly, and heel to toe movement is impaired. So for them, lifting the leg from the floor, they lift the whole foot, lifting the foot from the floor. They lift the whole foot at once. Normal is the heel lets go of the surface, then the toes remain touching the ground. Then finally you lift off like that. But these individuals, the whole foot lifts up and then slumps down again like that. So that is affected. So you see that again, then there's problem in the anterior lobe of the cerebellum. Then when there are problems in the neocerebellum, which is essentially the posterior lobe, we see that there is now incoordination in muscles that do with voluntary movement. So all skeletal muscles, they'll be affected. So when it comes to the foot, heel to shin movement is affected. And then inability to cope with rapid alternating movement. So like I was explaining, pronating the arm or supinating the arm and pronating becomes problematic in such individuals. So two groups, aciocerebellar syndrome and neocerebellar syndrome. Achio, movement, right? Then, achio is equilibrium or balance. The neocerebellum is coordination of movement. And this is where we end for today concerning the cerebellum. As usual, if at all there are any questions, please be free to reach out to me. We can have discussions about these things. All right, so we meet in the next discussion.